Well, let's start with some introductions. Jim, since you're new to the podcast, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, I am Jim Antonini, and I've been coming to this bar for a long time. I'm good friends with Al. I've written some books. Al and I have talked for years about doing a jeans book. He didn't want these stories to disappear, and he kind of wanted to have a tribute to some of the people that used to hang out here that are no longer around. That's kind of been the idea behind the book.
Yeah, it's really awesome to see this thing finally come to fruition. And for those who don't know, the book is out now. It's available for purchase on the store. The Hot Dog Diaries, stories from Morgantown's oldest and most beloved bar.
It's available at the bar, online on Amazon.
Oh, right on.
Al's
My
website.
Yeah. Welcome to jeans.com.
The jeans website.
I think mine has like a signature in it. I don't know. Is that?
That's
yeah.
I didn't sign yours yet.
Well, make sure
Not
that
that
happens.
you want it, but
Of course I want it. Yeah, of course. Makes it real. Well, so we hear a lot about the book. With this podcast, I think a lot of what drove this thing to come to be was some of the same impetus that Al had for the stories that this place has and wanting to share those. But tell us a little bit about how the process got started and kind of from you, Al, like what was the motivation and what got you to here.
Well, one of the things the most said thing in jeans was always, you know what Al ought to do, you know what Al ought to do. And so, we got this idea, we ought to write a book. I bet you could write a book. And so, Jim's like, well, we should do one sometime. And so we talked about it for a long time.
For years, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, he had some time and said, well, let's do it. So we would sit down and I'd tell him stories and get some of those stories out before I start forgetting them,
Yeah.
I mean, there's even some details I forget now. I don't know if my dementia's setting in or what's going on,
Yeah.
So we sat down and started, doing it. We'd meet and stuff. And so I think it turned out pretty well.
How long did the process take?
We met 3 or 4 times. I kind of knew a lot of these stories, but we just needed to get some of the details.
Right.
And then it just took a few months to hammer it out, get it all down on paper.
Yeah.
My idea with the book was to keep it short, keep it fun and light, and also give some history to the place.
Yeah.
And also highlight what jeans means to the community. I think that was part of the book.
Right.
The neighborhood and Morgantown.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I've liked the most about this book so far is the way that the chapters are organized and the way that the short stories sort of like have their home within each chapter, but then each one of them kind of adds to like the bigger story of the chapter. Can you tell us a little bit about how the book is written and how those stories fall within?
Yeah, I kind of want to. Yeah, I was, that was part of trying to put the book together. I wanted it to be an easy read, and I wanted some of the funniest stuff up front and at the back. So the first chapter is about Peanuts, who's one of Al's old buddies and worked here for 26 years or something.
Yeah.
Or maybe longer than that, 30 years.
On and off for that. I don't know. He was the first person that I actually advertised in the newspaper back then for a bartender, and he showed up and we were in here talking and my dad comes walking out of the back and he looks at him and he goes, "Do you know that guy?" I said, "Yeah, Pete." I said, "That's my dad." He goes, "I've known him for years," because my dad used to get out to Point Marion to the Eagles and the places down there, and Peanut hung out down there. He bartended at the Klondike Motel or something, I don't know. And so he was always in that area down there, and so I ended up hiring him, and but he's just got a thousand stories of Peanut and his life, and it's just crazy. So
it seemed like it. I felt like there was still more to be said about Peanut even after his section was done.
Some things that can't be said about Peanut.
Yeah, there's some R-rated Peanut stories.
I would love to see the unedited version, or like.
I think Al's always talked about doing a,
unplugged version or something.
Let's write that down. That's a podcast episode. We'll do Peanut Unplugged. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I really loved. I think the cool thing for me is that I would consider myself a part of the jeans community, right? I spend a lot of time here, but you only can capture and absorb so much, especially for I'm a little bit younger, right? Like I didn't live through a lot of this stuff, so I hear some of the stories and like hear people talking about these characters, but to see them come to life was really cool, and it gave me a real strong sense of kind of the essence and the heart of jeans in the story.
And I was hoping that if you read that book, if you didn't even know the people, the book was still entertaining and interesting,
Definitely.
even though you didn't know some of the old regulars or bartenders.
Right, and so like for me, like, not having the full context, it did a really good job of helping me to not only just like meet these people, right, but also to learn a little bit more about like why things are the way they are, I remember the first time I ever heard somebody order a Betty.
Yeah.
It's just one of those like
that book gives the history of the Betty.
It does. And if you're sitting at the bar and someone next to you is like, "Hey, can I get a Betty?" And you're like, you're trying to act like you know what's going on, but you don't really know what's going on. So I'm like, what in the heck is a Betty? And then
you can go to different bars downtown ordering a Betty, and they know what you're.
Yeah. I thought that's really cool. I think this book is really important, and this type of storytelling is really important because it, like you said earlier, captures kind of the essence of the neighborhood and tells not just the story of jeans, but also the story of our community. So yeah. So out of this book, what was the easiest process, and then what was like the hardest thing about getting the book out?
Probably the hardest thing for me was I wanted to keep the book short in which stories to include and what stories not to include. There's so many other stories that could be in there.
And when I tell a story, I tend to drag it out pretty long, and because there's a lot of details that I throw into it and stuff. And so for Jim to be able to, cut it down and get it into a chapter or something like that, then that was.
So I guess the easiest thing was there was a lot of stories, but the hardest thing was which stories do we include in the book?
Yeah. Yeah, that's always tough.
And who we were going to piss off.
Right. Have you pissed off anybody? You feel like you got any?
No comment.
Yeah, we won't go there on that one.
Well, I will say, like, I think that
and two people requested not to include their name in the book.
So
we had to change a couple names.
Yeah.
Protect the innocent.
Yeah.
Or the guilty in most cases.
Yeah.
But for the most part, like this reads like it's pretty accurate and true to the people and characters.
All the stories are true.
Stories are true.
It's hard to
believe
make this
sometimes. Stuff up now.
It's hard to believe sometimes, but
it's like, oh my God, that really happened. And, oh yeah, it happened.
Yeah. One of the current bartenders read the peanut section. He's like, "Man, he was a lot worse than I am. Al's always threatening to fire me. I'm not nearly as bad as Peanut."
Some ammunition.
Aubrey said that.
Yeah, I've fired Peanut more times than George Steinbrenner, fired, what's his name?
Billy Martin.
Yeah, Billy Martin, yeah. So.
I will say, I think I learned a little bit more about you, Al, too, by reading this book, because the amount of grace that you had for Peanut to be able to like bring him back on after all the things that happened in this book says a lot about your character too.
Oh my gosh.
And when I first started coming here, people don't know, I used to let the regulars have bar tabs. And somewhere in the thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Al ever got all that money back.
No. I had this little like recipe box out there and had cards in there and had, people that had a tab on there. And I mean, I don't know how many cards I had for Peanut, probably, probably 20 cards written on, and I think at one time I figured out he owed me about $5,000 or something,
Wow.
And that's back when, beers were $1.25.
Yeah.
That's a lot of beer.
Yeah.
So.
Jeez Louise. Yeah, that's wild. When you are thinking about like some of those stories that didn't quite make it, or the ones that you decided to put in there, like what was your thought process in figuring out like, what stories would add to the overall narrative, which ones would be better saved for later time?
the ones that didn't, I wanted to make sure we had a story about some of the regular people. Mm-hmm. So that would eliminate, there were so many Peanut stories, so we couldn't put them all in there.
Right.
And you could do your own book on Peanut.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just process of elimination, trying to make sure we cover certain people that hung out here all the time that aren't around anymore,
and also leaving out certain embarrassing facts of some of the people that happened. That we didn't want to
be tactful. And
also want to leave room for the history of the place and some of the history of the music here and some of the fundraising that Al's done at the bar.
Yeah, I appreciated that too. I'm glad that you all got a chance to talk about not just the people, but you also talked about the place and the story and then some of the culture and music and art that's come out of this place as well. It feels like you guys covered a lot of it.
People look at this place and think, oh, that's just a bar, but it's more than a bar. It's kind of the center of the neighborhood or community.
Yeah,
it's kind of the melting pot of Morgantown.
Kind of the lighthouse for many people, right?
Yep.
Yeah, when I was thinking,
keeps the light on, even on Christmas he was open.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve opened up for me the other night, and I said, "Yeah, people have been asking," and he said, "Yeah." He goes, "I don't want to disappoint the 11 people that are going to show up or something." And I said, "I'm taking the over, Steve. I think there's going to be more than 11 people."
Yeah.
So,
I think I spent when I was in college here. I spent at least one Thanksgiving and at least one Christmas here at Gene's. And one thing that you mentioned earlier about one of your bartenders seeing all the stories about Peanut and feeling a little bit better about their position. I was thinking about that too, of just how many different people have walked through the doors here, right? And how many different people and all the crazy range of stories and personalities that have made a place in this book. And for me, that makes me feel a little bit more welcome and a little bit more like I can be myself here and I can not get judged and.
Yeah, and the number of people that have worked here too over the years. I mean, we were trying to think of them all at one time, and it's funny. Something will come up and somebody will say something, and I'll say, "Oh yeah, he used to work for me. Oh yeah, he used to work for me."
Yeah,
we were going to try to list every single bartender, but Al's like, "I won't get everybody," and then somebody will feel bad their name wasn't
right. Yeah, put like a little table of contents in the back or like a glossary. Yeah, everybody's name. Yeah. So when is there any one story in here that, I mean, obviously Peanut is a big part of this book, but besides that, are there any pieces of the book that are your favorites or that you really enjoy the most?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, obviously the Peanut stories are, they stand out from everything. I mean, we've had a lot of different things. Somebody asked me if we'd ever had a wedding here. So yeah, we've had a wedding, and we had a funeral here.
Yeah.
Brought a guy in, laid him on the table out there.
Blew my mind. Blew my mind.
There's actually a picture of it, but it wasn't a good enough picture to include in the book.
Yeah. So where do we call to schedule our weddings?
The guy whose body was here, he just lived across the street.
Yeah,
they carried him over.
That's wild.
Yeah, he tried to die a couple times before out there, and his wife called me one day, wanted me to come over. He'd had an accident, and I went over there, and he was naked, hanging out the upstairs window. With blood running down the roof and dripping off onto the ground down there. I'm like, what the hell happened?
Oh my goodness.
So I went over and stayed with the kids so she could go to the hospital with him and everything. And that was just craziness, So
yeah.
The two stories that people tell me are the favorite that aren't Peanut stories is the Joe Lucas story the night before his wedding, or before his wedding, Al takes him to get a tuxedo.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Al could tell the story. And the second story is the guy falling through the window on the Super Bowl.
Man, the tuxedo one, that kind of like made me cringe a little bit thinking about it.
Oh, it was in the bathroom in his socks and pea pee all over the floor, and he's walking out, and his socks are about this much further than his toes are. And
Imagining the
they're kind of
sound of that
flapping.
is just yeah.
Yeah, the guys had Reiner and Core where the old clothing store here in town. That's
Right.
where the tux came from. And,
Right.
And they finally looked and said, he's starting to come apart. We need to get him out of that tux and everything. So, but it was.
And Joe was working for Al, odd jobs,
Yeah, oh yeah, he would clean for me in the morning.
Yeah.
and he wasn't bathing much. And when they were doing the measurements, right, they had to hold their breath to measure the inseams of his.
Yeah, that was hilarious as I was reading through it, but I don't know. I'm trying to think when I was reading that book. I think it was around dinner time, like I was at the dinner table, and I got to that part, and I was like, maybe this is for after I get done eating my food.
You better wait till food settles.
Yeah. Well, there was a story in there. I don't know if it was Joe, but the cleaning the toilets.
Oh, that was Joe.
Was that Joe too?
Yeah.
That one I remember vividly, like thinking about just
Lucy told that story.
Man, yeah.
And she said she saw the gloves weren't opened, the package of gloves, and then he had to
putting
reach
two
in
and
that
two
toilet
together.
with his bare hands. And she said, I walked into the other side of the bar and said, God help us.
I was waiting to hear that like he came out and washed his hands and he like cleaned up. No, he came out and ate chips out of a bag. Yeah. Oh man.
And
I had him fill up my bathrooms used to be out there where the stage is, and had a sink there, and had one of those soap dispensers that you put it in and you screw the top on and put it upside down, and of course you always got soap all over your hands, and so he's standing there in front of the sink and he's got this soap all over his hands. He just looks around and he just wipes it rather than washing his hands. He just wipes it on his shirt like this. I'm like, oh my God.
Feral. Well, I know all about that because I have a 3-year-old, but that's, that's a choice.
And Al said Joe used to, this isn't a book. There's so many other stories. Al said he would have the packages of hot dogs in the back, the bulk packages, and they'd be cut open.
Then they'd be open and there'd be a couple hot dogs missing out of it. They were frozen.
Just like frozen hot dogs.
He said Joe was stealing the hot dogs out of the package.
Man.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't say what I said about the rest of the thing, but about taking them home with him or whatever. So, but
Yeah. Like I said, this book does make you feel good about yourself in a way, you know. If you can put yourself in those shoes.
Yeah, we've had weddings, we've had funerals. I had a girl come up to me and she says, my parents said I was conceived here.
Whoa. Wow.
So, well, that doesn't surprise me. There's probably more than one of you walking around.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. As a dad, I'm sure that's something a dad would say. Yeah. So Jim, tell us a little bit more about your history with writing and some of the other works that you do, and a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's kind of how it was easier to help Al write his book. With the help of a couple other people, we started this publishing company called Pump Bake Press.
Okay.
And it was kind of a vehicle to get my books out.
Yeah.
When I was in Boston, I had did a lot of writing in Boston before I moved back to Morgantown, and I had an agent and trying to sell books. It just wasn't going well, and then met this woman that was interested in trying to help me get my books out, and she said, start your own company and start, putting your own stuff out, and that's kind of where that all came about. Yeah. And a lot of these books were stuff that was partially written years ago, and then when the pandemic hit and I all of a sudden had a lot of free time, I was able to clean some of the books up and kind of get them out in the last few years.
Yeah.
And Al's book has, people saw that I helped Al write a book. People are now contacting me, hey, I'd like to write a book about my father. I'd like to write a book about, this relative that had an interesting life. So other opportunities are starting to come about because of the Genes book.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun to write a book that's a true story. These are novels. My stuff's fiction, so
A little different, but
yeah.
That's really cool. I mean, I'm glad that you all two knew each other and had that kind of.
Even
connection.
before this, years ago, Al knew I did a bunch of writing, and he was always saying, "We got to do a Genes book sometime."
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, I always had intentions to write,
Yeah.
but it's hard. It's really hard to write.
It's hard to get the time.
Yeah, it's hard to get the time, and it's hard to take something. And then we were talking about this earlier. Like, I'm really good at starting a project.
Yeah.
I'm really not great at finishing the last 10%. And so, like, the idea of actually getting a book out and printed, and it's impressive. So.
Yeah. And I'm surprised how well some of these books have sold.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's so many online bookstores and local events where you get local arts walks and events where I can sell these.
Yeah. So are you now based locally in
Yes, I'm living back here in Morgantown. Yeah.
Awesome. Find yourself at Jeans a lot now.
Not as much as I used to.
Yeah.
I used to just live down the street when I was in graduate school, and I was here, most nights.
Yeah.
After,
Isn't it sad? I miss it. I used to live right next door too, and I always considered Jeans like a second living room.
Yeah. I lived a block away, and it was just too easy to come up here, and you'd have somebody to talk to, and you knew people here. And,
Yeah.
It was an easy, come and have a couple of beers before you went to bed.
Didn't have to
or
cook
come up
food.
here and watch a ball game.
Yeah. Get yourself a hot dog, a Jean Supreme.
Yeah.
Mess with Lucy a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that you're that you did this for Al, but I'm also glad that like this is a part of your work of telling stories, because I think there are a lot of people that maybe similar boats as Al and I, of like having these stories and like wanting to write, but that next actual step of getting the words on paper and getting it printed is sometimes really challenging.
Yeah, I appreciate him taking the time to do it. I mean, that was a huge undertaking. I mean, like you, I always thought about it. Maybe I could write a book, because I mean, when I start writing things down and everything, I mean, it usually turns out pretty well.
Yeah.
I write a story about something or whatever, but to be able to actually put it together in a book like that, there'd been no way I'd have been able to do that.
Yeah, and with the Pump Freight Press and this lady that helps me put this stuff out, it was easy. Once we got stuff on paper, she formatted the books, and that's how that all came about.
So what are you have any plans for this book? What's the we were sharing some ideas about doing maybe not a sequel, but doing some more featured stories of Peanut, or having some podcast episodes. What are your plans?
Yeah, I mean, I keep joking about coming out with another, version of things, and some of the other stories. Like you said, we don't want to piss anybody off.
Right.
Don't want to say too much about one thing or another. I mean, some of the subjects are a little touchy, probably.
One of the things I was thinking about as I was reading this is how you could take some of these maybe true stories and add some creative flair to it and turn it into like a movie or a TV series, or you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like there's such good like raw
Gene's
content in
mini
here.
series.
You could do so much. You could do so much.
Yeah.
Like even just a couple short videos, like making these stories come to life. And I'd be just because when it was so easy to picture, like we were talking about a minute ago, like the sound of those socks. Piss-soaked socks, just like that would just be hilarious to see.
Or a picture of his balls laid on the bench.
Oh yeah, the Christmas party where his testicle fell out of his little hole in his pants.
Freshly smooth testicle just sitting there.
People have come up to me, that a lot of people that worked here said, I got thousands of pictures or hundreds of pictures. I think a nice book would be to do a bigger book, color pages with a lot of pictures, maybe a photo book of the history kind of.
That's a great idea.
Because Al has a bunch of pictures. We were scrambling to get this book out for the 80th birthday party of Jeans.
Yeah.
So we mainly want to get stories, but I think maybe in the future we could do a big picture book.
It's a great idea.
The pictures kind of tell the story or the history and the people.
A lot of people tell me they have pictures, and
And we just didn't have time to like sit down and get them together, scan them all in, and
that's a whole nother type of project too.
we wanted to, and also when you do pictures and color, it's a lot more expensive, the book. So that book, didn't cost anything to print, and we wanted to sell a bunch of copies, and
that's awesome.
Kind of get the history out, the story of it for the 80th anniversary.
Yeah, the idea of a picture book is great, and I enjoy like snooping around on the Facebook page here and there and seeing everybody post their photos and stuff, and I'm sure it'd be real easy if you put all call out to get
Yeah,
a bunch of
that's probably a good
stories.
idea. That on the jeans page or website, people can download their pictures, and then we
Yeah.
could put them all into. Because there's people that probably have pictures you don't even know about that just
Oh,
used to
I
hang out
guarantee
here.
it. You know.
There are so many things that we could say about this book, but the one thing I'll tell everybody is you gotta get it and you gotta read it. There's all sorts of incredible stories in here, and I think one of the things, like I said earlier, that I really got from this is just the sense of, not say the culture, but like the essence of this place. Like I think sometimes, and you know, you experience this too, Al, it's like hard to put to words the experience of jeans, and I think this book does a really good job of helping somebody get that context and kind of understand the story that this place is telling. And so I appreciate the work you guys did in putting this together, and I've really enjoyed reading
I
it.
mean, Jeans is a special place, you know. And everybody says, "Oh, you did this, you did that." I said, "No." I said, "I didn't do anything." I said, "I unlock the door. I keep the beer in here. It's the people that come in that make the stories and make the place, you know. I mean, there's so many personalities, so many stories, so many things that happen here that are you just can't explain them all, you know. And
Yeah.
it just kind of all comes together, and I'm just steering the bus, I guess. I don't know. Just people keep getting on and telling their story and moving on and that kind of stuff. And
Yeah. Well, for now, buses don't drive themselves, so it's still really important to have a bus driver.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet.
Beauty of this place, though, it's right in the middle of a neighborhood too, so you can't help but have interesting people stroll in here, right?
Yeah.
Of all the different kinds of people,
Yeah.
the diverse nature of this neighborhood, from college students
The homeless, to astronauts,
to high school students.
Magic of Greenmont. Well, thanks to y'all for hopping on the podcast and for telling us a little bit more about this book. And again, just plug it away and keep plugging it. If you haven't had a chance to pick it up, definitely pick it up because it's a great, entertaining read.
We create new stories every day here, so
Yeah. Episode 2 coming out soon. Yeah. Awesome.
So,
Jim,
we
Al, thanks.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Sweet. That's all for today. I'm Paris. See you next time at Jeans.
It's a pretty funny story. The first time I ever was here, I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and they were still cutting hair here.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather, who was from Italy, brought me here to get a haircut.
Oh, yeah.
He was babysitting, or my grandparents were babysitting me, and he didn't tell my mom, and this was in the 70s, and the hairstyles were longer.
Right.
And he brought me here because he didn't like the longer hair. You know, he's old school. Brought me here in Gene, right? Gene Pirelli. He shaved off all my hair. And my mom came to pick me up, and she was crying when she saw that I had a bald head.
That's
my
right.
grandfather sat out here and drank beer all afternoon. I just sat here with my new haircut in the back. That was my first time here at Gene's.
Man.
For more on this episode, behind the scenes, and even more music, check us out on Instagram at Welcome to Jeans or online at welcometojeans.com.